Hi, I'm Steve Sonderbeck. This is Career Weeks, which is our main career event here at Vista High School. And I'm the director of the College and Career Center here on campus, if you don't know me already. And we have with us our assembly person, Tasha Boerner Horvath, today to talk a little bit about her career path, what it's like being an assembly person, and kind of what the process is that she goes about in her daily life to fulfill that position. What kind of things she works on and things like that, and also what's required and what you really need to do to get involved with being in elected government. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can kind of give the students kind of an overlay of kind of where you've come from and what you actually do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Tasha Boerner Horvath. I represent Encinitas, Carlsbad, Oceanside, Vista, and Camp Pendleton in the State Assembly since 2018. And my path to State Assembly was maybe very non-linear, if we would want to call that. So as you know, the State Assembly is much like the Congress, right? The House of Representatives and Congress, but for the state. My kids, I have an 8th grader and a 4th grader. And when they say, "Mom, what do you assemble as an assembly member?" And I say, "I assemble laws." So that's the best way to remember it. You assemble laws. But my path wasn't very direct. I was a kind of science nerd in high school and went to Berkeley to study astrophysics. Found out I'm not very good at physics and switched to political science because I was very interested in current events and European politics in particular. So I went to graduate school to get my PhD. I got a master's in international relations, and I was getting my PhD in political science and studying social movements and coalition building in Western Europe. I lived in Germany, and that's where I met my husband. And so my dissertation had kind of fallen apart, so I didn't finish my PhD. But I had met my husband, so I guess I got love over dissertation. So I guess that's a good trade-off in life. And then reoriented my career, and because I had to do something, I had to, earn money and work in this country. And so I started a small business, building websites for small businesses. And then I started consulting with the World Health Organization to help really eradicate some what we call neglected diseases. They're diseases of poverty that exist where we have the medication to prevent them, but often it's just the actual implementation of getting that medication to the people who need them. So I did work in public health, which I never thought was going to be relevant in the middle of the pandemic in the State Assembly, but here we are. So I have that experience. And then I decided to go corporate and work for the parent company of T-Mobile. So I did internal communications, marketing communications, because I think political science teaches you to think, and it teaches you to write, and it teaches you to communicate in a very structured fashion, which all translate into the working world in marketing communication. So you can do other things too, but that's where it translates. So that's what I ended up doing as a career after not finishing my PhD. And so that was really, I think, an important experience for me, because as a legislator, I have to communicate with folks like you, folks like your parents, your aunts, your grandparents, and that takes a lot of skills to be able to communicate complicated concepts and bills pretty succinctly. So I ended up doing that for about 7 years. And then my husband and I, with our 2 kids, moved back here in 2012. And so then I worked in international higher education doing print marketing. I did I was just, used to bike commute to on a beach on the 101, which is the most beautiful thing to do. And then my daughter was diagnosed with some special needs, and my husband is European, so he was never going to deal with our healthcare system. So I decided to be the stay-at-home mom. My husband had been the stay-at-home dad. He decided to go work, and then I stayed home. I was a horrible stay-at-home mom. I I got involved in my local schools, my kids' PTA, because they've been trying to get a stop sign near the school for 20 years. And we came together and we organized everybody. And again, it's that same thing of political science, right? I studied social movement, so I understand theories of bringing people together, but this was the practicality to bring people together around getting the stop sign in that they had wanted in 20 years. And we got it in 6 months. And they're like, "Tasha, you should run for city council." I was like, a stop sign is a horrible qualification for local government, because local governments do everything from housing to roads to, when do you underground the utilities? They tell you what, programming do you have at your parks? Where should you have parks? There's all these questions around that a stop sign doesn't really prepare you for. So then I said, okay, wait, hold on, simmer down. Let me get on the planning commission, because, within a city government, within the city of Vista and the city of Oceanside, you do have different commissions. So Encinitas and Vista both have a youth commission. So if you're living in the city of Vista, please apply for the youth commission. It's a great way to understand and influence government. I think there's never too much that you could do to be involved as a young person, because I always say you don't want old people like me making decisions for you. So you have to be involved. You have to have that voice. You have to be engaged in order to so that we can hear you. So I got on the planning commission. The planning commission makes decisions about where we have buildings, right? It's their built environments. Like, where do you have houses? Where do you have restaurants? Where do you have bars? Where do you have all these different things? And I loved it. It was like, I wish I had discovered when I was 20 years old, there was a thing called urban planning. I would have totally done that instead of all the other stuff, because it was just so fascinating to see how you determine where and how things get built, determine your quality of life. It determines if you need to drive from A to B, or if you feel safe to walk and bike to A and B. Like all these different things. If you build, shops near apartments or homes, like, oh, people will choose to walk. If you build them far away in strip malls, oh, look, they feel like they have to drive, right? So all that is determinant of what you do. And so I loved it. Obviously, you can tell I totally loved it as a planning commissioner, became a planning geek. And then I ran for council in 2016. Won. I was the only woman on the ballot. And so that was, I didn't even realize it till after the fact that I was the only woman, to be honest. But I won. And then in 2018, we had started to have, I'm a Democrat, and so we had started to have like what we called the blue wave. And they were looking for a solid candidate to run for state assembly. And ever since I got involved with the city, because I had that background in political science, I have been very interesting, and especially the state housing laws, about what state laws are doing, because you have a level of government, right? I don't know if you've learned this in your civics class. I'm sure your teachers taught you, but you have the federal government, and there's nothing a lower level of government can do to violate the federal government. And then you have the state government, and there's nothing that the counties or the cities can do to violate the state. And then you have the counties, and if there's a cross-jurisdictional thing, there's nothing they can do. So you basically have this idea of preemption that goes through the levels of government. That's how we have set up our federal system. And so a lot of stuff that we were wanting to do locally was either not allowed at the state level or disencouraged in the state level, or the wrong things were being promoted at the state level. It's like, I need to get in there. So then I ran in 2018 for state assembly. Remarkably, I won. I'm the first Democrat since 1978 to be elected. Just a reminder, I was 5 in 1978, so it's been a long time coming. I'm very proud to do it. I was reelected in 2020. As you'll recall from your civics class, lower houses run more frequently than upper houses. Lower houses are supposed to be more responsive to the people. Upper houses are supposed to have the long-term view. That's why in Congress, the House of Representatives runs every 2 years, just like the Assembly. And the US Senate runs every 6 years. The state Senate runs every 4 years. So just to remind you of that. So I run every 2 years. Ran in 2020, won again. And we've done some really important things. So if we're talking about the job, my election is the equivalent of an interview process. I interview with up to 500,000 people who live in this district. Only the registered voters can vote, but and we have the number of people is 500,000. So it's like 350,000 people are interviewing me for this job every 2 years, right? And so when we talk about it, what an assembly member does, there's lots of things we do. One, we make laws. So I can talk about some of the laws that we make. My son's here. Mate, make sure your work's done before you do Sudoku. Sorry. That's reality of Zoom life. And so where was I? Oh yeah, so we make laws, and I can go through some of the laws, but we also engage the community. And one of the ways I've engaged the community is I have district advisory councils. So I bring folks from all over the district to talk about housing, homelessness, environment and sustainability, transportation and mobility, our seniors, healthcare, all these different topics. And that's how I know what to do in Sacramento, because it's easy to say what I think as a person, but I represent 500,000 people. And some of those people can vote, and some of those people can't vote. So if you're under 18, you can't vote, but I still represent you. So I want to know what people think. So I do a lot of engagement locally. That's why my Sulima from my team is on this call. She'll drop her name in the chat if you ever want to get involved. We do have an internship program in the district office. Would love to have folks who are engaged and interested in going into politics. You know, as I said before, there's nothing greater that you could do for your future now than be involved in what decisions are being made, because the decisions we make today will affect your life in 20, 30 years. And I especially think that during the pandemic. So a couple key bills that I think may be interesting to you. Every year I run lots of bills, but I come down to 4 bills. 4 bills go to the governor's office. You know, 2 years in a row, the governor signed all 4 bills that gets his desk, because if you recall from civics, I have the lower house, so they go through my house. Once they get out of my house, they go to the upper house, goes through that house, comes back, double check, is that still the same bill? Yes, it is. Go to the governor's desk, governor signs. So every year I've sent 4 bills. So I have lots of bills that I love to talk about, but these are the ones I thought would be really important to you because they affect you and your future. And so one is AB 931, and that's representation on local boards and commissions. We know one of the things that prepares people, especially women, to be involved in politics is serving on a local board and commission. We also know that many of these boards and commissions are all men. Like when I got on the planning commission, one of the reasons I applied was because it was all men. And in what world should one gender be making all the decisions for all of us? We know that diversity makes us better. We know that. That's like a scientifically studied fact that we do that. So this would, it has a sunrise of 2030. So we're giving all of our cities lots of time to prepare and appoint more women, but it would say no one gender can represent more than 60% of a board and commission. So if you have a commission of 5, no one gender could have 3, more than 3, right? So you'd have to have more diversity on women on commissions and boards, unless they're gender specific boards. Sometimes at the state level, sometimes you have gender specific boards on status of women or, incarcerated men. Sometimes you have very specific ones. So the gender specific ones are taken out. And the nice thing about the bill is also neutral. So it says no more than 60% for one gender. So it also allows for people who are gender non-conforming. So we want to make sure that we were very inclusive in this law. AB 467 was one of my big bills that was signed my first year. And this says you cannot pay female athletes less than male athletes on any athletic contest on public lands. So we know, especially in surfing, but also in cycling and skateboarding, women aren't given the right airtime, and so therefore their purse prize is lower, and so therefore male athletes can compete in bigger and better, and they can make a living doing it, where female athletes can't. And we have something called Title IX, where we say you can't discriminate between male and female athletes, and we've applied this to any competitions held on state land. So the big one that people think about if you're into surfing is Maverick Surf Contest. If they're going to have male and female category, then they need to make sure that the purse price for both of them is the same. And this comes back to a gender pay equity issue that we know we have. We know what women, especially women of color, make even less than men. And what are we going to do systemically to change that so your future is more equitable? And then, of course, we have AB 1426, so I passed this last year. It was a 2-year bill. People have been trying to save Trestles Beach and San Onofre State Park for about almost 20 years. And we managed to preserve it from road development in perpetuity. That means forever. And so to be able to save a park and to fight for gender equity and have a better future for for people like you, I think are really important goals that I have. So in my second term, I have way too many bills. They're all really important and they're all kind of hard. So we're working on it. But my goal is always to get 4 that we go to the governor's desk. The 2 that I think that are really interesting for you guys is we have AB 233. I did an audit of the UC admissions process, and we found irregularities. One, there was a preference given for people who had connections and money, and we know that's not fair in our public system. And two, we found that depending on who was reviewing your application, if you got somebody who was a very hard review evaluator versus somebody who was an easy evaluator, there was not equality and equity in those application processes. So my bill, AB 233, would require standardized training for all evaluators and a standard deviation of looking to make sure you're not having one person rejecting 90% of people and another person accepting 90% of people, because those are the metrics that you use, and they have to do this. Exactly. You know, and the UCs, they came back to us and they're like, we're doing this already. And I was like, trust but verify. So that's really important. And then I have AB 117. This is a really important program. I know it's supported by Councilmember Corina Contreras and Vista, and this is my e-bike rebate program. You know we need to move to electrification. We know we need to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels in order to reduce greenhouse gases and save the planet from climate change, so you guys have a place to live. But one of the things we have with electric vehicles is it's very difficult. The infrastructure for charging isn't really there. A lot of old apartment complexes have a problem with being retrofitted in order to provide easy access to EV charging. But what we do know is e-bikes are an effective way of getting people out of their cars. And because we have so many hills in my district, it's very effective at flattening hills. So remember, I used to bike commute to Sauna Beach. I had to go up from the 101, that Loma Santa Fe hill. If you've ever been up it, it's a really long hill. Even with an e-bike, I was definitely getting my workout. So e-bikes do make it flat. They, and in our transit system in North County, normally we talk about a first mile, last mile problem. How do you get to the train station? How do you get from the train station? How do you get to and from the bus station? We actually have a first 5 mile, last 5 mile program. North County Transit has reduced the number of bus stops. If you've noticed in our area, it's harder to get places in public transit. So e-bikes are going to be one of those things that can bridge that. And so what we're saying is we're providing a rebate program, and we're going to have some percentage. We're still debating about what percentage will be for folks who are below the average median income in the county. So we're making sure that we're doing an equitable distribution of the rebate program as well. So there's just 2 bills that I'm working on, but I'm working on lots of bills. I have a housing bill, I have a bunch of enviro bills, I have some transportation bills. I just have those because I always do them in sustainability, opportunity, and equality and equity. Because if you ask anybody, those are the things everybody here cares about. So we want to make sure we have a more sustainable planet for you. We want to make sure we have good jobs for you. We want to make sure that you have a place to live and a roof over your head and a shot at calling North County home again when you graduate from college. And then we want to make sure that we are creating a more equitable and an equal society. So those are the things we care about. Those are the things I care about. Those are the things I work on. And I'm supposed to also mention that I put it under hashtag NerdsWin, because you can tell that I'm a little nerdy and geeky about all this stuff. Last month I became the assistant majority leader for policy and research. So I do have a policy and research team now within the state assembly that's looking to translate research into policy for our Democratic caucus. And so we're looking at, how do we help catch kids up that maybe have fallen a little bit behind because of the pandemic? What are some strategies? What are some ages? What do we need to do? We're doing a one on reemployment. We know we have people who have been sectorally unemployed. People who have worked in retail and restaurants and hospitality and tourism are disproportionately have been affected by the pandemic and the closures. How do we help them get back on their feet, retrain them, get a good job that they're going to have a higher earning potential in? And then the third one is, really for you guys, this is I think important for every high school kid because of climate change, which is we compare any climate change project or climate adaptation project to the cost of doing nothing, when really we should be comparing the cost of a project to the delayed cost of implementation. So we're trying to create a metric of, can we quantify the cost of delaying climate adaptation? Because we know the further we get out, we know things start falling away as options. So I could give a bunch of examples, but then I get very wonky. So I'm happy to open it up to questions that we have in the chat.
I kind of want to follow up real quick with a question which I have personally, which is obviously creation of bills is sort of your bread and butter of activity besides serving on all the different commissions. Where do those ideas come from? Are they reactionary? Is it just something that you're observing in the community?
Mhm.
Is it coming out of that new commission or research that you're doing? Is it collaboration? Where does the ideas and where does the inspiration for new bills and legislation come from?
Sure. So there's lots of places they come from. Every year I run There Ought to Be a Law program. And so I have constituents write in and say, this should be a law. And sometimes we can do that. And sometimes they're not really laws, but they're changes in administrative policies that we request. I sit on the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. So I audit a lot of people all the time. I will audit any institution in the state of California. If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't be afraid of me auditing you. And so like the UC emissions bill comes from that audit. It was the auditor went in and they did an extensive research into what was going well, what was not going well, and what the legislature should do. And so that's where that bill came from. The e-bike rebate bill had been something I've been talking about because when we talk about EVs, we know low-income folks who live in multifamily housing struggle to be able to afford an EV. And we know this, and we're looking at what are the things that reduce greenhouse gases. Well, people can choose to get out of their car or they can choose to have electric cars. So, we have to do all the things to, mitigate climate change. And so that one is something I was talking about. So I went to an organization called Cal Bike and said, hey, we want to do something on this. And they're like, okay, let us work on it. They had a couple lawyers, so they helped work on it with that one. So I think, there's just lots of places they come from. Some of them, I'm known for writing a lot of my bills myself. I have a small lot bill, my third year running. I wrote that bill myself. I wrote a lot of the women on boards and commission I talked about. I wrote that bill myself. The bill on the first improvement in Title IX in 40 years for the gender equity and pay on state lands, I wrote that. So with council members Corey Schumacher and Carlsbad, I don't know if you know her, she's actually also a 3-time world champion surfer. So people forget that because they're like, oh, she's a council member. I was like, oh, she's also a 3-time world champion surfer, So she's pretty amazing. So we worked on that one together. So yeah, some of it come out of conversations with other electeds. Some of it may come out of the news. Some of it may come out of audit. Some of it may come out of an academic study. Some of it may be recommended from constituents. So yeah, I have, yeah. But that's a great question. I think we do have a couple in the chat. I'm not sure.
We do have.
Oh, there we go.
How do you deal with people who feel like there are more important items for you to address besides the ones you're currently pursuing? Are there people who act like that? Asked Sarah.
I don't know if there's people, when I talk to people in my district about what I'm doing, because I always do a range of the sustainability, opportunity, equality, and equity, I feel those bills cover the range of things that people want me to be doing. And that's true also by the reelection numbers, right? So if I'm doing things that my constituents don't want me to do, this is the whole job interview idea, right? So if I'm doing stuff my constituents don't want me to do, I won't get reelected. Like that's there's no real getting fired from a job when you're elected. You could be recalled, but those are very statistically unlikely, and but you could be unelected. So I feel like this work I'm doing, it resonates with constituents when I talk to them. But there are people who have partisan ideas. So some of these bills are kind of like nonpartisan. Like when you look at reemployment is not a partisan issue. Like we all want people to get back to work, right? That's like not something Democrats or Republicans will differentiate on. What they may differentiate on is who should get back to work and how. So I have a very strong equity lens when I look at issues. And I want to make sure that folks of all income levels and all backgrounds are equitably included. And maybe that doesn't mean equally included. It maybe means we need to do something for populations and groups who have been more left out in the past, right? That's how I pursue things. So there are people who will differentiate often on the how. And then, people like my first year, I voted on 4,500 bills, right? I read 4,500 bills. I voted on 4,500 bills. That's a lot of reading. I became very good at skimming and like knowing what they were. But there would be people on each one of those bills that were on either side. And you're never going to please everybody in this job. What's important, I think, is to understand what you need and what you want, and to be able to serve my constituents. That's how I look at the bill. So I hope that answered that question.
And we have another question from Elizabeth here is, from all of your years of being an American politician who serves in the California State Assembly, what has been the toughest for you? So I guess she's asking, what's the toughest year, and how has the pandemic impacted your job?
Well, I would say the last year has got to be the toughest year for us all. As I said, I have some weird background with the World Health Organization, so I've done some of this before. So when it first hit, I looked at it and I remember we recessed for 4 weeks. We were planning to have a 1 week spring recess, and we had extended that to 4 weeks. And I told people, I was like, there's no way, we have a worldwide pandemic. There's no way we're coming back to the state legislature in 4 weeks. Like, they had sent my kids home and said they're coming back after spring break. I looked at it, it was like, there's no way my kids are coming back to school after spring break. Like, not with this is not what this is. And so I think, what's been toughest is we were on this track to really do a lot of stuff with climate change and all this stuff. And then you look at the folks in our district who are completely struggling. It has been hard to watch EDD, our Employment Development Department, who is responsible for unemployment claims, and Sulima can speak to this a lot because she handles a lot of the calls, call in time and time again and see that our administration side, it doesn't matter how good the bills are, if you don't execute them well, the help doesn't get to the people who need it. And so it's been really hard this last year, not in terms of the bills, but in terms of seeing people in the community struggle and it's been rewarding to do everything I can to help them, but it's been frustrating to see certain administrative agencies like EDD time and time again not rise to the challenge to meet what's going on right here and what people really need right now. So that's probably been really struggling. And the way it's impacted is normally what we would do is we would normally be out in the community and we'd be doing this in person. And, I would be at the Strawberry Festival and I'd be here and I'd be there and I'd be presenting a check to the city of Vista at City Hall or something like that. And I'd be focused more on my bills. But when the pandemic hit, our office pivoted towards everybody helping with their EDD claims. So it's still true. If you know somebody who's struggling with either DMV or EDD or any of these things, Sulima can put her email into the chat and you can help her, she can help you or those people get the help you need. We still are doing that. And it really encompasses about 6 hours of every one of my staff's day. I have 5 staff in my DO. 6 hours of their day is spent only on helping people with unemployment claims, which is massively different than all the stuff we were doing before. And then we've gone to virtual things. And so there's some things where I'm not driving around, and sometimes I had to choose this meeting or that meeting. Now I could do multiple meetings. Like on a day like today, I could do multiple meetings because I do have a meeting, I think. I hope it's not now, Sulima. I feel like I'm over time.
No, 10:30.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Still fine.
Okay. I was just checking. I was like, whoo, okay. So I think that's one of the ways is that with Zoom, we can be at multiple places at once, but it's less personal, right? We're not, you're not asking me a question. I'm not, seeing you directly, and there's less of a connection, which I think when you're trying to really understand people struggling, that personal connection is really important, and we just can't do that yet. But the good news is there's good news on the horizon. It looks like we're going to red tier next week. Our vaccination levels are, San Diego is probably the best county in the state of California for vaccinations. We have done the best job vaccinating folks to help us get out of this pandemic. Let's hope. And if you're in civics, you can ask your teacher about arms races, because I'm not sure you actually cover arms races. But those of us who are over 40 remember arms races from the 80s. And we're basically at an arms race between vaccinations and the new, more contagious variant. So people really, I know it's struggling, and I know we're exhausted. We've been here doing this for a year. None of us want another Zoom. None of us want to wear masks anymore, but we have to keep it up because we're at this arms race. And if we let the more contagious variants take over, they can mutate to something where the vaccine isn't nearly as effective. And then we're doing this for longer, but we're almost there. And the hope is that next year we return to school in 5 days a week. Maybe we have to still wear masks. You know, I think the other thing that people forget about this pandemic, and I'll just take this opportunity to highlight it, is we don't know a lot about this disease. Like, we know some things, we know directional things. We know like masks are better than no masks, outdoors are better than indoors, fewer people better than lots of people, right? We know those kind of directional things, but you know, we don't know, for example, with the vaccines, do they stop transmission or do they just stop you from getting sick, right? If Moderna and Pfizer stop you from transmitting it, we have probably won the war against COVID-19. If they just stop you from getting sick but allow you to still transmit it, we might be wearing masks for a while. So we won't know these things. So it requires, for you guys, I think, you know, what I see in my son and I see it in his friends and when I see in you guys, is you guys are asked to do a lot of really adult things right now. You're asked to, you know, better manage your own schedules, better manage your own needs, to make all these kind of adult decisions. And, you know, there's no way we can stop you or stop from asking that, but we need to have more of these adult decisions of being flexible, being patient, going with the flow in a way that feels uncertain and maybe makes us anxious. And when we do that, we're going to be better prepared to adapt and be flexible in the long term, but it doesn't feel really great now. So some of you aren't feeling great. I totally get it. It's hard right now. But we have more questions and I'm talking.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Have you ever felt not belonging in the California State Assembly?
So I'm going to rephrase that because I think when I went up there, so one, I never lie. I tell people exactly what I think. And when I read every bill, and if I'm not going to vote for it, I tell them so. So other people play more typical politician games. I don't do any of that. And I thought that would never work. I thought like, they're going to want you to smile and kiss babies and do all this stuff. And I'm like, very straightforward. And I didn't think any of that would work, except it totally does. Everybody appreciates that they always know where I am, that where like, they know if I say yes, I'm voting for that bill. If they know I say no, they know exactly why. They know, there's been bills I voted no on. I've created 5 sets of different amendments to get me to yes. I was like, these are the things that need to happen to get me to yes. Like, I do all that work. And I didn't think, because it's very like non-typical politician, right? To be super straightforward and direct and informal. But it totally works. So it's not that I don't feel it belongs. I felt like the way I wasn't likely going to be successful as a politician, except that I was proven wrong, that it is successful. Well, and when you guys are 18, you know, and you decide to vote, then I'll know if it's actually successful. So,
okay. So next question is, what did the process look like when changing what you have been studying in the college? Have you always
that's a great question. Yeah, no. I started out astrophysics. And I got halfway through my physics class and I really sucked at it. Like, I was not good at physics. I was like, what am I going to do? I went to UC Berkeley to do physics. I wanted to become an astronaut. I guess I can't become an astronaut. It was like very, you know, so what I'll tell you what so my process was when I looked at that and realized I didn't learn like that. I had been taking political science 1 as one of my electives. And I did like that. So I was taking physics, math, poli-sci 1. And so that was my first semester at Berkeley. And on the political science side, I loved it. It was more than loving just like current events, but I loved the analysis process of it, because that was very similar to the scientific process. Political science actually has a rigorous qualitative and quantitative method, and I'm very good at that. So basically, as a political scientist, it was like an easier form of physics for me. So it was, you were just taking different questions. And there's, you know, unlike physics where they're like absolute right and wrong answers, in politics, there's no right or wrong answers. It's what you can persuade people on. And I like persuading people. I like debating people on things. So, you know, that worked for me. But I think personally, I'll tell you, I think I wish I wouldn't have had a major when I went to college, and I wasn't so set on a career, because I think that didn't make me open to the number of careers. Like that's why I didn't become an urban planner. Had I not gone in with a certain set idea that I had to be an astrophysics a physicist because I wanted to be an astronaut, had I gone in with that, I might have taken an architecture course, and maybe I would have become an architect. Like I would have probably taken a lot more things. And I don't think I had a life experience. You know, I grew up lower middle class, so I don't think I had a life experience that really taught me the range of professions that are out there in the world. So that's what I tell my children is they don't need to decide what they want to do. They need to learn to do well in school. They need to learn what they like and what they don't like and why. Because what you want, a career is something you find interesting, something you're good at, and something you can make money on, right? So, you know, I try to steer them more that way because I wish somebody had done that with me. I don't know, that was a very long question. So yeah, more questions.
Eric asks, what is the most important factor you take into account when proposing a new bill?
So most important factor is how does it positively impact my district? So the number one thing is like, what does it do for my district? I would say number two is how much does it cost? Because there's, you know, money isn't free and money doesn't grow on trees and you have to pay for it somehow. And number three is where does it fit into the whole idea of sustainability, opportunity, and equality, equity. I do look at it that way. So lots of questions. You guys are very good. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Lavoie asks, is there an area you would like to grow and learn in as a leader and relatively new politician?
Sure. I think, you know, what's ironic is I'm more comfortable with the policy side than the politics side. So I'm more comfortable talking about the bills and all that stuff. And then there's how you go about doing things. And I feel like every year I'm very lucky that I have really good relationships with my colleagues in the Assembly and Senate. And every year I learn more. Well, then when that person does this, it actually means that, not what you think it means. Because as I said, I'm a very straightforward person and other people are not very straightforward. So you kind of have to second guess what people are doing. And that's where I think I need to learn more. But as I said, I have some great colleagues that, you know, help coach me. And, you know, that's what I would say to you is like, whatever thing you want to end up doing, you know, being open to learning and being open to going into a new area and having people teach you. I'm 48 years old and I'm still learning new things, you know, and to, you know, not think I know it all or you know it all. None of us know it all. The teachers, you know, they probably know it all, but, you know, but to keep that open mind, I think is really critical.
Hannah asked, have you worked on any recent bills that strive to bring students back to the classroom safely? And more specifically, what is your stance on this issue? I think you covered a lot of the pandemic stuff.
Yeah, so I think the bill that we passed was AB 86 that we passed, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, that provided $2+ billion in support to schools, and it's based on what we call our LCFF funding formula. So LCFF, it says schools that have higher needs, like they have more English language learners, more low-income students, more foster youth, more homeless youth, more special ed, that they get more money, and the schools that have less of those students get less money. And so that's a way of equitably, it's by no means perfect, but it's a way of equitably distributing money. And so that money will go out to help schools reopen. And then the second thing is around what we call learning loss mitigation. The correct name is learning acceleration strategies. We know that people in the last year have struggled. So, you know, some of you have been in distance learning or in-person learning some of the time. Some of you have been in distance learning the entire time. It kind of varies throughout the state. And in my district, I have a lot of schools that either have a lot of in-person learning or they want to have a lot of in-person learning. That's what I was saying. We're going to register next week. So a lot of people are going to open up next week for secondary and hybrid. So we have a lot of that. vast swaths of the states have, remained closed. San Francisco, if you're familiar with purple, is our most restrictive tier because that means that you have a lot of community spread. And then you have red, which is like, some community spread, better watch out. And then you have orange, like, hey, getting better. And yellow is like, you're good, right? So those are our tiers in the states for understanding the COVID transmittability. And I told you about the arms race between the more contagious variants and the vaccines. So with schools, my district is very much an outlier. If you look at Oceanside, you look at Vista, you look at Carlsbad. Carlsbad has elementary back 5 days a week. My daughter's at Encinitas Union. She's been back since September in hybrid. Vista has been back 5 days a week in elementary. I think you guys are coming back, or you are just now back in hybrid for secondary. So that it's all working out, I think, in my district differently than other parts of the state. San Francisco was in yellow and they refused to bring back elementary schools kids. So what does that tell us? We tell us that certain grades or certain points in a student's school life are probably more critical than others. This is what I was talking about, this learning loss. And we're gonna have to help people catch back up. And that we call it learning loss, but I really think it should be called learning acceleration because it's not on you and it's not on any of the other kids. They had no choice in going to distance learning because of the pandemic. And so we know that there are learning acceleration strategies, but one of the interesting things, if you look at other disasters like Hurricane Katrina, is both for teaching strategies as well as learning strategies from students. If people don't have the social and emotional support to deal with the trauma of the last year, we know it's very hard to teach them in new ways, and it's very hard for them to learn in new ways. So we've dedicated $4.6 billion to learning loss mitigation throughout the state. That can look like summer school, that can look like Saturday school, that can look like intervention, that can look like summer school next summer. And so we know we're trying to do this because everybody is surviving a pandemic, your teachers, the students, our staff, our families, our community. And so, but we know when we pull together, we're going to make this work. And part of making this work is the state ensuring that we have the funding to make sure that we're able to do that. Next question.
Okay, I don't think we're going to have time for any more questions. We are.
Oh, okay.
We're out of time. We have a lot of other great questions in here. I'm sure we could go on an hour or two with this if we had the time to do it. I want to thank you for generously volunteering your time to come in and talk to the students about your role in government and what you do on a daily basis. And I want to thank the instructors for bringing the students today. And students, you had some great questions. Again, wish we could stay longer, but I also have another session that's going to start up here in a few minutes as well. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Have a great day. Keep up the great questions. I love them. Take care. Bye.